In today's video, we begin Marvel's major 2025 saga called Imperial, which promises to revolutionize Marvel's cosmic universe like never before. The story starts with two unidentified figures about to face off in a game. Not just any game, but a cosmic game. One of the players, staring at his opponent, asked if they should start already or if the other side was starting to feel afraid. After all, the stakes were high. Losing didn't just mean a negative score, but possibly the end for him and his entire family. Even so, the other responded without hesitation that maybe his opponent was right. But he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try. That's when the first one commented that the game they were about to play was similar to charade, a game of pure strategy, completely asymmetrical, and that became more complex with each opponent because the player never knew how many enemies they were facing. Could be just one or several. The second competitor started to smile, eager to see the first moves from his rival, and the first competitor revealed that the first act is always the same. Someone has to die. Then the scene shifts to Portal 231b, an interstellar structure between the Milky Way and Andromeda. Inside a spaceship, Jennifer Walters, uncomfortable, asked Amadeus Cho why they were here. The truth was, not even Amadeus knew. The consul had simply said Bruce Banner's presence was required at the funeral. Jennifer and Amadeus hated space, but both knew that when the big guy asked for a favor, the only possible answer was yes. During the journey, Jennifer directly asked Bruce why they had to go with him. And Bruce was direct in his answer, because they were family, and his son had died. At that moment, the consul appeared and informed them they were about to land. He had also prepared ceremonial robes for the ritual and asked them to follow him. As they walked through the corridors, Amadeus told Jennifer about New Sakar, since none of them had been here before. According to what he had read, New Sakar was a planet of constant warfare, where only the strong survived. When the hatch opened, the consul declared that the Hulk was finally home and that the people of Sakar had missed him. At this point, they were already dressed for the ceremony, and we get a presentation of the characters. Amadeus Cho, known as Brawn, one of the smartest beings on Earth. Jennifer Walters, the She-Hulk, Lawbringer. And at the front, Bruce Banner, the Hulk, Worldbreaker. Together, they headed toward the city. Hulk observed the destruction and asked if people really missed him, considering everything was on fire. The consul, still connected to the central information system, acknowledged the inconsistency of the situation. The city was supposed to be in mourning, but instead, it was chaos and turmoil. Amadeus checked his device and confirmed the traditional protocols. After the death of a warrior king, the people would enter a mourning period before the Ascension Games began. That's why he asked if they had arrived too late. The question was brutally interrupted. A body was thrown in front of them, and the attacker said the only loss they had suffered was the chance to have a real warrior king, criticizing Hiro-Kala as a failed king. The consul reacted by drawing his swords and warned that kind of insult wouldn't be tolerated. But the gladiator didn't hesitate and sliced the consul in half. He then stared at the group and asked if anyone else wanted to defend Hiro-Kala. Hulk's response was fitting. He said he wouldn't say a word in Hiro-Kala's defense, and in one quick motion, he threw the purple opponent across the city. Right after, Hulk dropped from the skies, landing on the gladiator and beating him brutally. He asked if he had anything else to say, and the nearly unconscious man begged for mercy, but Hulk just smiled, because in New Sakar, there was no such thing as mercy. With a brutal strike from his axe, he tore the opponent apart and shouted, asking if he'd been away so long that they had forgotten who he was. One by one, the inhabitants began chanting the name of the Worldbreaker. They knelt. Respect had returned. Hulk then turned to one of the bystanders and asked what had happened, and why the city wasn't mourning Hiro-Kala. The answer came immediately. Hiro-Kala's death was shrouded in mystery. That's why the Galactic Council had sent scientists to examine the body. The paladins and clerics of their world witnessed the conclusions, and what they discovered was serious. Hiro-Kala hadn't died of natural causes. He had been poisoned, murdered, and on Sakar and Nevo, a death by murder was seen as defeat. A defeated king could not keep the throne, and even his political marriages were annulled. Now, his wives and their clans were fighting over the throne, as were all the other pure-blood sons of Sakar. Jennifer looked at Bruce and asked what he planned to do, and the answer couldn't have been simpler. Hulk wanted answers. Shortly after, the heroes headed to the Galactic Council's ship, where the experts were finishing their analysis. Hiro-Kala's blood left no doubt. 2 poisons had acted in coordination. The first adapted to the host, searching for weaknesses. The second was activated once the weakness was found, finishing the job. Once death set in, the 2 compounds became inert. Jennifer, impressed, praised the coroner, who thanked her for the compliment, but emphasized that this was exactly the kind of investigation his team handled. Amadeus commented that it sounded highly specialized, and the coroner didn't disagree. He said their collective mind was the most advanced in the council, and they were always summoned when a case demanded the impossible. Curious, Amadeus asked how they knew they had to investigate there. After all, Sakar and Nevo was considered a peripheral and forgotten planet with little importance in intergalactic politics. So what had caught the attention of the forensic team? The coroner hesitated for a moment and then answered honestly, they knew exactly what they were looking for. Hulk, now impatient, wanted to know why such a specialized group had gone straight there. That's when the revelation came. In just 2 weeks, Hiro-Kala was the 4th leader of an allied world to be killed in the exact same way. It didn't matter the title, sovereign, tyrant, or head of state. They had all been assassinated using the same poisoning pattern. Someone was killing leaders. Finally, the closing ceremony began. Hiro-Kala's body was laid before the crowd, and a priest reminded everyone that he came from fire, and to fire he now returned. As the funeral pyre was lit, Hulk asked Jennifer to stay behind. He would go with Amadeus and the medical team to the council's center to trace the source of the poison, and once he found who was behind it, he promised to hurl them into the nearest black hole. Jennifer preferred to go along, claiming it was family business, but Hulk insisted she stay, because although he was still respected as an authority, the succession wars were about to start again. He had declared 5 days of mourning, but he admitted that peace wouldn't even last an hour without someone there to remind the people who held the power. That's why he asked Jennifer to stay. She agreed, but asked if 5 days would be enough, and the Worldbreaker assured her it would. He had given his word, but according to the narration of the story, Hulk wouldn't return in 5 days. Meanwhile, the narrative took us to Fulcrum Station City, the nerve center of the Galactic Council. Officially, it was a hub for intergalactic trade and transport, but many believed its true purpose was to consolidate a centralized power structure, a formal union among the Council's worlds. In a medical wing, Jason, Emperor of Spartax and father of Peter Quill, watched anxiously and asked if there was still hope. He had just been informed that Empress Victoria remained in critical condition. Cryogenics had only temporarily paused the effects of the poison, but so far, no cure had been found. Peter Quill, the Star-Lord, wanted to know if they had sent doctors to other planets. The doctor replied that once the hive convened, they would do what they could. But for now, he advised not to hold on to hope. Jason asked to be informed of any updates, and the doctor agreed, calling him Emperor. Peter was surprised by the title. Jason explained that the Spartaxians needed leadership, and he had to use the ring again. Peter understood but couldn't accept the weight of it as just a consequence. He asked his father if he thought Victoria, his half-sister, would survive. Jason didn't give him false hope. If she died, It would mark the fourth intergalactic assassination, and worse, a major council meeting was about to take place, a full-scale crisis. Peter asked what he believed in, and Jason replied that he didn't believe in coincidences. He would do anything to save his daughter, but he knew there were limits. What remained was understanding why this was happening and acting on it. As soon as the council was in session, he would lose control of the situation. The issue would no longer be about his daughter or his people. It would become pure politics. He needed someone from the outside, someone unbound, someone who could investigate freely. Peter joked, asking if he meant the legendary Star-Lord, but Jason said no. That kind of rebel was useful in brawls and gambling, but that's not what he needed right now. What he needed was someone with a sense of order, someone with an analytical mind, a crime solver. Meanwhile, aboard an escorted ship, Hulk and his companions arrived at the heart of galactic power. Amadeus Cho asked the consul to share the investigation results as soon as possible. The consul said he'd be busy, but promised to get in touch once there was news. Then a group of soldiers approached to escort them. One of them addressed Amadeus as if he were an ambassador. He replied simply by asking who was in charge there. The soldier explained that there were many rulers in that place, and all of them thought they were in charge. Amadeus agreed, but pointed out that inevitably, someone always stood out. The name that came up was Jason of Spartax, and Hulk demanded to be taken to him. The story then dives into the lower levels of Fulcrum, the underworld of the station. Peter Quill walked into a shady bar, saying he'd heard he could find an old friend there. The place seemed tailor-made for him, run down, filthy, filled with dangerous characters. But his old friend corrected him, saying he was wrong. This wasn't Peter's kind of place. There were space knights, Imperial soldiers, members of the Light Brigade in one corner, and himself, Richard Ryder, one of the last two remaining Novas in the universe. Yes, the planet Xandar, home of the legendary Nova Corps, had been obliterated in the Annihilation Wave. Only two of them remained, along with the dormant collective mind of their civilization. Peter tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but Richard cut straight to the point. He pointed to the wall, where a wanted poster with Peter's face was hanging. Everyone in that bar believed he belonged in one of two places, behind bars or in the ground. Peter brushed it off, saying that had already been handled and someone needed to take that poster down. Then Richard, unimpressed, asked what he wanted. At the same time, elsewhere on the station, Jason was discussing the backstage dealings of the upcoming council meeting. He mentioned pulling a few strings and said everything was almost ready. He asked the gladiator if everyone had arrived, and the answer was yes, everyone except the Wakandans. Turns out Wakanda didn't see the need to break old alliances in order to form new ones. Knowing that, Jason noted that without vibranium, they wouldn't be able to mass-produce the next generation of star portals. And at current prices, it was unfeasible to buy it. The chameleon representative confirmed the Wakandans were well aware of that. Jason then asked whether it was power or wealth they were really after. But before the conversation could go any further, they were interrupted. A visitor was waiting for Jason. It was Hulk and Amadeus Cho. Jason received them and asked what he could do for them, but Hulk was blunt. Jason knew exactly why they were there. A series of assassinations had taken place, and Hulk's own son was among the dead. That's why he wanted answers. Jason reported that his daughter was in stasis and likely to die as well. Beyond that, nothing had been confirmed yet, but as representatives of New Sakar, he invited them to take part in the council meeting. There, they would see with their own eyes what the universe had in store. He also expressed sorrow for Hiro-Kala's death, and Hulk, his voice heavy, admitted that his son had hated him. He said he had failed the boy in many ways and that now he would never be able to make it right. Of all the regrets he carried, that was the most painful, and no one could imagine how deeply that made him furious. Then we return to the underworld, where Peter was talking to Richard in a secret arena. Richard wanted to know what was so special about the place, and Peter replied, "Violence and gambling, but dressed up a little." Richard disagreed because it didn't seem dressed up at all. The fighters, known as Star Warriors, had once been respected members of the Imperial Guard. Now retired, they survived by building arenas like this one, hoping to one day return to the Empire. Richard remarked that everyone there was chasing a purpose, and Peter agreed. Something like solving crimes, for instance. But he regretted that Richard was unemployed. Richard corrected him, saying he was retired. Peter then asked if he was bored, and the Nova admitted that he was. That's when, with the fight raging in the background, Peter offered a solution, saying he had a job for him. His father needed the best and was willing to pay well. But surprisingly, Richard declined the offer, leaving Peter genuinely confused. Richard explained that despite their friendship, he couldn't just ignore the fact that Peter was a criminal and Jason an ambitious aristocrat. He added that it wasn't personal, but their money didn't mean a thing in that place. Peter stood up and sadly said that wouldn't be the last time he disappointed his father. But before leaving, he left the door open for Richard. Just in case he changed his mind, the offer still stood. Meanwhile, Jason's doctor delivered the verdict. Empress Victoria couldn't be saved unless a miracle occurred. Even in stasis, the poison was progressing. In other words, death was inevitable, just like the other victims of the toxin. But this time, the doctors revealed something more. They knew with absolute certainty who had created the poison. With that information, the story jumped to the grand session of the Galactic Council. Jason stood before the packed chamber and, in a solemn tone, deeply regretted having to start things that way. He had hoped for a meeting to discuss treaties, trade, and alliances among empires, but he acknowledged that would have to wait, because there could be no unity when people in that very room were deliberately killing their fellow council members. Amid the stunned silence, he announced that a murder had been committed, and the one responsible was among them. The impact of the statement was immediate. Deathbird warned Majestric Xandra they were in danger, which Gladiator confirmed. Emperor Dorek turned to Super Skrull and asked if he knew anything, and he denied it. Jason went on, stating that his daughter, the King of Sakar, the guardian of Orion's empty throne, and the last witch of the deviants of Zartar had all been killed by the same combined poisons. One highly mutable, able to adapt to the victim's body. The other, direct and brutal. Together they bore the signature of two races, the Skrull and the Kree. The chamber froze as Jason continued, affirming that the origin of the toxin traced directly to those two civilizations. 4 simultaneous assassinations across 4 separate empires. This wasn't the work of dissidents or rogue cells. It required planning, intelligence, resources, and at the very least, authorization from a throne. Wiccan reacted first, vehemently denying it. He said Emperor Dorek would never do such a thing. Ronan the accuser demanded proof, but the chameleon representative called for the immediate arrest of all the accused. Teddy tried to calm the panic. He said it made no sense, and that he would never authorize such an atrocity. He also confronted Super Skrull, asking if he had anything to do with it, and even though the question was offensive, since he had humbled himself to form that alliance, he assured them it wasn't them. That's when a new voice rose, cold, unrepentant, confessing that they were the ones who had done it. The Kree-Skrull Ministry of Science admitted they had been hired to create the toxin. That was their specialty, manufacturing weapons of war. But they emphasized they were not the ones who used it, only the ones who supplied it. The room erupted in questions. Jason wanted to know who they had given the weapon to. Hulk asked the same, but before any answer could be given, a shot pierced the scientist's head. A clean, lethal kill shot. As expected, chaos took over the chamber. Amadeus immediately identified the action of a sniper. Then another shot tore through the crowd, and representatives started dropping. The chameleon leader was hit in the chest. Gladiator shielded the Majestrix with his own body. Hulk roared, demanding to know where the shots were coming from. Amadeus only needed one more shot to calculate the trajectory and pinpoint the sniper's location. And that shot came straight into Jason's chest, who collapsed brutally in front of Peter's eyes. Amadeus didn't hesitate. He precisely pointed to the origin of the shots, and Hulk leapt with fury. And when he reached the sniper's location, he was shocked to discover the shooter was a Wakandan agent. Before he could react, the enemy activated a device in his hand. The result was a massive explosion that rocked the station, throwing bodies and debris into the vacuum of space. The sniper used the distraction to escape, and even though Hulk wanted to pursue, he was intercepted by an Oracle counselor. She warned that the star portals were being jammed and that no one was escaping that system. So she begged Hulk to leave the assassin for later. The time now was to save whoever they could. Later, the survivors gathered in an improvised infirmary. Peter wanted to know how many had died, and the answer was grim: 12 dead, including 3 heads of state. There was also a growing list of the missing, among them Emperor Dorek and his consort. The Empire was hanging by a thread, and Ronan had already summoned the accusers. Several war fleets were mobilizing. Deathbird had requested a new hearing. Everyone was preparing, and Peter confirmed he would be there too. But first, he approached a body covered by a sheet, obviously his father's. He held the ring in his hand, closing it in silence, until suddenly someone approached from behind. Peter said that person was a little late to be the cavalry. And we see that it's Nova, who had heard what happened and came to help. Peter asked if he could find those responsible, and with an eager smile, Richard promised he would try his best. An hour later, the assembly reconvened. The air was thick with tension. Deathbird took the floor and suggested they start by presenting what they had discovered so far. But Peter Quill didn't want to beat around the bush. He asked directly if she knew who was responsible. Before she could answer, Ronan intervened, claiming he wasn't bringing theories, he was bringing proof. With a voice full of conviction, he declared that he had evidence in his hands and judgment in his heart. He explained that council medics had removed the projectiles from the victims' bodies and analyzed the chamber's surveillance footage. At the same time, on Nuhala, the accusers had launched a parallel investigation and managed to trace who had funded the Ministry of Science. 2 separate data streams, from 2 different places, converged on a single point, one origin for the attack. Peter, now out of patience, demanded to know who it was. The story then returned to the game board from the beginning of the issue, where everything had started. Those shadowy players reappeared. One of them declared that this was the turning point. The shadows were moving, and the real enemy was about to be revealed. But the other player also smiled. He admitted that he loved surprises, and that the great game valued pieces that knew how to move skillfully. Back in the assembly, Ronan gripped his hammer tightly. A hologram was projected in front of everyone, and he explained that the accusers had traced the bank transfers to institutions in Wakanda Prime. More than that, the bullets extracted from the bodies were made of vibranium, fired by a Wakandan agent. The silence lasted only seconds. Peter looked around and asked what they were going to do now. Nova remained silent. Deathbird responded coldly, claiming that there was blood on her wings and the bitter taste of betrayal in her mouth. The chamber would not let this go unpunished. They couldn't, not after this. To them, there was only one possible answer. And it was Hulk, the world breaker, who concluded by saying that now there would be war.